What's up guys, Houndish here, and today we're jumping in with just a few news updates for Destiny 2. And today we have a few reminders and bits of clarification from Bungie. We'll talk about the upcoming January 30th update for Destiny 2, some new content that we're going to see, as well as some of the changes from this week. And then we're going to look forward to some content that'll drop in the final shape, and we'll discuss Destiny 2 development expanding to receive help from Sony Studios. And of course that could have a big implication on future updates, as well as the next expansion. So we've got those items and a few other things to discuss today. As always, I hope you find this one useful, and if you do, a rating below very much helps us out on the channel. But now, let's get into it. And initially, regarding content this week, we've got the return of Iron Banner. Interestingly though, after just a few hours of Iron Banner being live, the game mode switched from Tribute to Fortress. Bungie didn't have anything to say on the subject, but the change was made nonetheless. Also this week though, we got the update, which allows Control to now be a selectable mode when Iron Banner is up. So if you just want the traditional Iron Banner experience, that is now possible. But other highlights from the update that we had this Tuesday include that Bungie fixed the cheese for the boss in the Starcrossed mission. They've attempted to do that before, but this time, I believe it actually worked. Plus there was a nerf for Peregrine Greaves, and they no longer deal additional damage to boss level tormentors like Nezarec. But additionally, for anyone working on the Reveler title, the Dawning Triumph that wasn't working can now be completed. And so we did get some useful updates in the patch, and we covered the rest of the patch notes in the video yesterday, so I'll link those down below. And looking forward to upcoming content, something to keep in mind, but Bungie say voting is almost over to decide this year's Festival of the Lost Armor sets, and of course, they give us the option between good wizards and bad wizards. I think a lot of players seem to be leaning towards the bad wizards. They definitely look pretty cool, but just keep in mind if you want to vote for that, the voting ends tomorrow on the 25th of December. And so if you haven't made a vote, I'll link the voting page down below. And on top of that, next week we're going to see moments of Triumph come back to the game, as well as some new pursuits for the season called Riven's Wishes. We should get more details about those in the TWID this week, so I'll keep you posted. But keep in mind, if you want to work on Moments of Triumph, we made a video on the weekend with all of the objectives. And so that's linked below if you want to check it out. Plus, when it comes to character customization that Bungie revealed the other day, players have asked how much we'll be able to modify, and the D2 team said pretty much anything but the overall character type. So we won't be able to make an Exo turn into a human, for example, but otherwise pretty much every other element will be customizable again when that feature finally drops. So just a few bits of clarification and updates there from Bungie. Up next though, in other news, it's been revealed that Bungie are getting some assistance in developing future content for Destiny 2. And of course, in the lead up to the final shape, Bungie have said that they want this to be one of the best expansions that we've ever had for the game. And of course, on top of that, with a lot of players dropping off the game recently, Bungie are aware that that expansion needs to be very, very good. And so one of the first things that we learned is that Sony Studio developers have been contributing at least some new content for Destiny 2's development. And a hard surface artist that previously worked for Sony did recently share some images of weapon ornaments that they've created for upcoming Destiny releases. And so these are ones that we're probably going to see in the final shape. And firstly, we get a sort of Witch Queen Deepstone Crypt themed ornament for the Parasite. Obviously, we've got some Witch Queen icons on the weapon, but also the overall theme for it matches the Deepstone Crypt weapons. So this is a pretty cool one. Obviously, it's not in the game just yet, but the assumption is that we'll see it in the future. And once again, the most likely time for that release will be the final shape, although we do have other significant updates like the April update, which Bungie are calling Into the Light. But that's one of the weapons to look forward to. And on top of that, it looks like we're going to see a new ornament for the Forerunner with the sort of Dreaming City theme. So looks pretty much identical to other Dreaming City weapons, but obviously looking at the geometry of the weapon, it does appear to be Forerunner, so that's another weapon ornament coming up down the road. And then there's one that there's less of a consensus about, which is this one. And the first two weapons were listed as being future ornaments for the game, whereas this one is simply called Exotic Pulse Rifle in the original images, and those have now been taken down as they were posted to ArtStation. And so it indicates that these are legit, but with this ornament in particular, potentially it could be something for Vigilance Wing or the Collective Obligation, and otherwise it's quite possible that it is a brand new Exotic Pulse Rifle, and it could be our missing Arc Exotic Pulse Rifle potentially, but once again, it may just be an ornament, so let us know your thoughts down below. But it's one of the demonstrations that Bungie have had some help from Sony. Plus, Destiny Bulletin reported that a design studio called Kracta is now working with Bungie on Marathon, and previously they've worked with other Sony studios on things like God of War and Horizon Forbidden West, so that's another component. And on top of that, there started to be some reports a couple of days back that Bungie now have 1,400 developers working on various projects in the studio. And this caused a bit of confusion because that number seems to be higher than it was previously, despite the fact that Bungie actually laid off a bunch of staff a couple of months back. So Paul Tassi reported that everyone, including some Bungie employees, are confused about recent listings that indicate that the developer now has 1,400 employees. But Paul Tassi also said Bungie has now given some updates on what the actual numbers are, far, and apparently they've said they've got around about 1,350 employees right now, and that doesn't include contractors or Sony employees. But they have confirmed that Sony and contractors are helping out, although that isn't a new strategy, as we've seen that in the past, especially when Bungie were with Activision. They had some of their partner studios like High Moon and Vicarious Visions that helped to produce a bunch of Destiny content, including the entire PC version of the game. But there's also an indication that any layoff roles that were lost haven't been rehired. But otherwise, we now know that Bungie have a bunch of help from Sony in actual development terms. And when we've seen things like The Taken King, also Rise of Iron, and Forsaken, those in particular have had a lot of assistance from other studios. So we know that Bungie can produce very good content drops, especially when they've got additional assistance. So that may be a potential positive for the Final Shape coming down the road. Plus, it's possible that Bungie are getting extra help on things like the Into the Light update in April, as on top of the expansion, they have additional content drops that they now have to produce. So for players who want more good Destiny content, I think overall this is probably a positive, as it means that Bungie simply have more resources to produce content. And in the past, that has been a big positive. So we'll see how it goes. Nothing is 100% certain, but theoretically, based on what we've seen in the past, this gives Bungie the best opportunity to create an expansion, which instead of under-delivering, can hopefully over-deliver to an extent. So give us your thoughts about that down below. And the very final thing I wanted to mention right here is actually related to the end of Season of the Wish. We know that next week we're going to see some new pursuits that are sort of part of the storyline for this season, and Bungie are going to reveal more details about that on Thursday of this week, so keep it locked and loaded here and I'll let you know what they say. But on top of that, it would appear that there's another mission that will complete as part of the end of this season, so a mild spoiler alert is necessary. If you don't want to know anything about that, I would click away from the video now. But there's one more triumph in the game related to seasonal content at the moment, and that's called Closer to the Heart, and it's to complete a mission called Closer to the Heart, which is interesting, especially given that one of the core kind of story beats that leads this season into the Final Shape is that we know the Crow is now inside of the Traveler, and in the Final Shape that destination is called the Pale Heart. So with this being a sort of stepping stone toward the Final Shape, it would appear that there is a mission where we're going to literally get closer to the Traveler and take another step towards the events of the Final Shape itself. So that's something that's already in the database for this season. As for when it will drop, presumably the pursuits that are going to start at the end of January will need to be completed first, but beyond that, it could be that this mission becomes available in one of the subsequent weeks, or that Bungie push it right back towards the end of this season, which will now be sort of April-May time, immediately before the Final Shape. Either way, it looks like there is one more major story component left for this season, and we'll simply have to wait and see when it drops. For today though guys, that's what we have to speak about in the video, so as always, I hope you've enjoyed it today, and if you have, a rating below really helps us out, plus get subscribed and I'll keep you up to date with all the goings on, the drama, the terrible turn of events, or whatever happens next. We'll just have to wait and see, won't we? As always guys, I appreciate you very much, and whatever you get up to, I hope you have an awesome day.